The prize of waiting.
Amoka was 22 years old when she first met Chidi. It was at her cousin's traditional wedding in Nsukka, a grand affair that brought together relatives and friends from far and wide. Chidi was a groomsman, his bright smile and charismatic energy lighting up the event. Amoka couldn't help but notice him, and it seemed he noticed her too. "Excuse me," Chidi said, approaching her with a confident stride. "I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here all evening without dancing. Should I take that as a challenge to my dancing skills?" Amoka chuckled, her cheeks warming. "Maybe I just haven't seen anyone worth dancing with yet." Chidi laughed heartily. "Ouch. But I like a challenge." He held out his hand. "Shall we?" It was the beginning of what felt like a fairy tale. Over the next few months, Chidi and Amoka became inseparable. He was a young man full of dreams and ambition, recently graduated with a degree in civil engineering. He spoke passionately about his plans to establish a construction company that would one day rival the biggest names in Nigeria. Amoka, on the other hand, was a seamstress, known in her neighborhood for her skill in sewing intricate designs. She dreamed of owning a fashion house where she could blend modern styles with traditional Igbo fabrics. Their shared dreams and mutual support deepened their bond. Chidi often encouraged Amoka to dream bigger, promising her that once he became successful, he would help her build the fashion empire she envisioned. "You and I, Amoka," he would say, holding her hand, "will conquer the world together. Just give me time. I'll make it, and then we'll have the life we've always wanted." Amoka believed him. His determination and charm made it easy to trust in his vision. Her family, however, was skeptical. Her mother, Mama Yugo, was the first to voice her concerns. "Amoka, my daughter," Mama Yugo said one evening as they prepared dinner together. "This Chidi you're so fond of, he's a dreamer. Dreams are good, but they don't put food on the table." "Mama, he's not just dreaming," Amoka replied. "He has a plan. He's hardworking, and I believe in him." "Belief is good, but a woman's youth is her greatest asset," Mama Yugo said, her voice soft but firm. "Don't waste it waiting for someone who may never become what he promises." Amoka brushed off her mother's warnings. She was in love, and she was certain that Chidi was worth the wait. As Amoka and Chidi's relationship faced its first real test. Chidi struggled to find steady work as an engineer. Contracts were scarce, and the few he managed to secure barely paid enough to cover his expenses. Despite this, his ambition remained undeterred. "I just need one big break," he often told Amoka. "Once I get that, everything will change." Amoka supported him as best as she could. She used the income from her sewing business to help him with transportation and food. She would often pack him lunches and encourage him before he left for meetings in search of contracts. "You're going to make it, Chidi," she would say, her voice full of conviction. "I believe in you." Chidi appreciated her loyalty, often calling her his pillar of strength. But as time passed, the pressure began to take its toll on both of them. Amoka started noticing the cracks in their relationship, small but significant. Her friends began to question her decision to wait. "Amoka, you're not getting any younger," Nneka, her closest friend, said one evening as they sat outside their compound. "Chidi is a good man, but what if he never makes it? You've already turned down several suitors because of him." "I love him, Nneka," Amoka replied, her tone defensive. "And he loves me. I can't just give up on him." "But love won't secure your future," Nneka argued. "You're talented and beautiful. Don't let your loyalty become your downfall." Amoka's family echoed these sentiments. Her older brother, Hugo, was particularly vocal. "Amoka, don't be blinded by love," he said one evening. "You've had good men come to you, men who are already established and ready to settle down. Chidi is a risk, and you're gambling with your life." Despite the mounting pressure, Amoka remained steadfast. She believed in Chidi and in the future they had dreamed of together. But beneath her confidence, a seed of doubt began to grow. What if her family and friends were right? What if Chidi's big break never came? The turning point came on her 27th birthday. By this time, Amoka had spent 5 years waiting for Chidi to achieve his dream. She had turned down multiple suitors, including a wealthy businessman who had offered to take care of her and her family. 5 years, she thought to herself as she sat alone in her room that evening. 5 years of waiting, hoping, and believing. Chidi had called earlier that day to wish her a happy birthday, but he was in Abuja for another meeting and couldn't be there to celebrate with her. His absence stung, but Amoka tried to remind herself of his promises. That night, as she lay in bed, her mother's words echoed in her mind, "A woman's youth is her greatest asset. Don't waste it waiting for someone who may never become what he promises." For the first time, Amoka allowed herself to wonder if she was making a mistake. But the thought of leaving Chidi, of giving up on their shared dream, felt like a betrayal. She resolved to wait a little longer, praying that his big break would come soon. Little did she know, her decision to wait would change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. When Chidi's business began to flourish, the entire village buzzed with excitement. Stories of his success spread quickly, how he landed a massive government contract to build roads in Abuja and how his company, Chidi Constructions, was now competing with top firms. He bought flashy cars, built a grand house in the heart of Abuja, and even employed over 50 workers. For Amoka, it felt like a dream coming true. After years of waiting and supporting him through thick and thin, Chidi had finally made it. She envisioned their future together, lavish weddings, a beautiful home, and children who would grow up surrounded by love and abundance. When Chidi returned to Enugu, it was in a convoy of cars, with his driver opening the door for him. The whole neighborhood gathered to see the boy they once knew step out, now transformed into a wealthy man. Women whispered among themselves, admiring his success and the sharp suits he wore. Amoka greeted him at her family's house with excitement. "Chidi," she exclaimed, rushing to hug him. For a brief moment, all the doubt and worry she had harbored disappeared. It felt as if the years of sacrifice had finally paid off. Chidi smiled warmly. Amoka, you stood by me when no one else did. Now, I can finally give you everything you deserve. He showered her with gifts, gold jewelry, Italian shoes, and perfumes she could never have afforded on her own. Amoka felt a surge of pride. She knew people in the community envied her. This is the man I waited for, she thought. It was worth it. But soon, cracks began to show. After spending a week in Enugu, Chidi returned to Abuja, claiming his business required his constant attention. At first, Amoka understood. After all, his success depended on his hard work. But the calls that used to come every day became sporadic, and their conversations became shorter. Chidi, you don't call me like you used to, Amoka said one evening, her voice tinged with frustration. Amoka, you know how busy I am, he replied, his tone dismissive. I'm working to build our future. Can't you just be patient? Amoka bit her lip. She had already been patient for years. But she didn't want to appear ungrateful, so she nodded and let it go. Over time, Chidi's visits to Enugu became less frequent. Amoka tried to ignore the rumors circulating in the community that Chidi was now mingling with the elite in Abuja, attending high-profile events, and spending time with influential women. Don't listen to gossip, she told herself. Chidi loves me. He promised to marry me. But her confidence wavered when one of her friends, Ada, pulled her aside after church one Sunday. Amoka, I hate to bring this up, but have you heard what people are saying about Chidi? Ada asked cautiously. What are they saying? Amoka asked, her heart sinking. They are saying he's been seen with a woman in Abuja, a senator's daughter. They say she's beautiful and wealthy. Amoka felt her chest tighten. That's just gossip, she said, her voice shaking. People love to talk. Ada hesitated, then nodded. I hope that's all it is. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with every unanswered call and every missed visit. A new temptation. The confirmation of the rumors came sooner than Amoka expected. One evening, as she sat by the window waiting for Chidi to call, her phone rang. It was him. Amoka, we need to talk, he said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made her stomach churn. Talk about what? She asked, gripping the phone tightly. In person, he replied. I'll be in Enugu next weekend. Amoka spent the days leading up to his visit in a haze of anxiety. When Chidi finally arrived, he looked as polished as ever, but there was a distance in his demeanor that she couldn't ignore. Amoka, he began, avoiding her eyes. There's something I need to tell you. Her heart raced. What is it, Chidi? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I met someone in Abuja. The words hit her like a thunderbolt. What do you mean you met someone? She's from a very influential family, Chidi explained. Her father is a senator, and being with her has opened doors for me, doors that I couldn't have accessed on my own. Amoka stared at him in disbelief. What about us? What about everything we've been through? Amoka, it's not that I don't care about you, he said, his tone almost pleading. But this is a strategic decision. I've worked too hard to let emotions ruin everything. Strategic decision. Amoka's voice broke. I gave you my youth, my loyalty, my love. And now you're telling me I was just an option. Chidi looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, Amoka. I never meant to hurt you. But life isn't fair, and sometimes we have to make tough choices. Amoka's world crumbled around her. She couldn't believe the man she had loved and waited for all these years was standing before her, justifying his betrayal as a business move. She felt humiliated, used, and discarded. As Chidi left, she collapsed onto her bed, sobbing uncontrollably. She had given him everything, her time, her love, her faith, and he had thrown it all away for wealth and status. The pain was unbearable, but as the days passed, it began to harden into resolve. Amoka's heartbreak consumed her in the weeks after Chidi left. She locked herself in her room, replaying every moment they had shared, every promise he had made, and every decision she had put on hold for him. The weight of her regret was suffocating. Her mother, Mama Yugo, tried to comfort her, but her words only deepened the wound. I warned you, Mama Yugo said gently one evening as she brought a bowl of soup to Amoka's bedside. I told you that men often change when they find success. You should have married one of those good men who came for your hand. Amoka turned her face away, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't need the reminder. The pain of losing Chidi was compounded by the realization that she had ignored the wisdom of her elders. She thought she was being loyal, but now she felt like a fool. Days turned into weeks, and eventually, Amoka forced herself out of bed. She couldn't let her life end because of Chidi's betrayal. One morning, she stood before the mirror, staring at the woman who had once been full of dreams and vitality. Her reflection was tired and hollow, but she resolved to change that. Chidi took enough from me, she said to herself. I won't let him take my future. Amoka threw herself into her work, reigniting her passion for fashion design. She spent hours sketching designs, sewing fabrics, and learning new techniques. With the little money she had saved, she started making custom clothes for women in her community. Her first clients were impressed by her skill and attention to detail, and soon, word began to spread. Amoka the designer, people began calling her. Women from neighboring towns came to her for clothes, and soon she was earning more than she had ever imagined. But success didn't come without challenges. At first, Amoka struggled with self-doubt. She worried that people pitied her or only supported her out of sympathy. It wasn't until she received a call from a prominent businesswoman in Enugu who wanted her to design outfits for a conference that she realized her work was truly being recognized for its quality. This turning point gave Amoka the confidence she needed to expand. With help from her brother Yugo, who had a knack for business, she rented a small space in Enugu to open her first boutique. She named it Amoka's Creations and made it a haven for modern and traditional Igbo fashion. As her business grew, so did her independence. Amoka learned to navigate the world on her own, making decisions without waiting for anyone's approval. She discovered a strength she didn't know she had, and it radiated from her in everything she did. Her personal life, however, remained quiet. Though men showed interest, Amoka was hesitant to let anyone into her heart. The pain of Chidi's betrayal had left scars that were slow to heal. "Love will come when I'm ready," she often told herself. For now, her focus was on building the life she had once dreamed of, one that didn't depend on anyone else. 3 years later, Amoka's life had transformed completely. Amoka's Creations was one of the most sought-after fashion houses in Enugu, with clients traveling from across the southeast to have her design their clothes. She had also been invited to Lagos for a fashion exhibition, where she showcased her unique blend of modern and traditional styles. Amoka was now 33, confident and radiant. She had grown into a woman of substance, one who commanded respect wherever she went. Though she still carried the memory of her heartbreak, it no longer defined her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone stronger and wiser. One evening, as she was locking up her shop, a familiar figure appeared in the dim light of the street. At first, she didn't recognize him. He was thinner, his clothes less polished, and his once proud gait replaced with a hesitant shuffle. "Amoka," the man said softly, his voice cracking. It was Chidi. Amoka froze, her hand still on the lock. She hadn't seen him since the day he admitted to betraying her. She had heard rumors about his divorce, but she had paid them no mind. Now, seeing him in front of her, she was struck by how much he had changed. "Chidi," she said, her voice steady but guarded. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. I heard about your success. I wanted to see you, too." "To what?" Amoka interrupted, her tone sharp. "To congratulate me. Or to ask for something." Chidi looked down at his feet, shame written all over his face. "I came to apologize," he said. "I made a terrible mistake, Amoka. I thought I needed more, someone who could help me climb higher. But I was wrong. That marriage destroyed me. She only cared about herself, about money and status. I lost everything in the divorce. I lost myself." Amoka crossed her arms, studying him. He looked nothing like the confident, ambitious man she had once loved. And yet, she felt no sympathy for him. She had spent years piecing herself back together while he chased after wealth and power. "I'm sorry for what I did to you," Chidi continued. "You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it all away. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you for a second chance." Amoka let out a bitter laugh. "A second chance? After you humiliated me? After you left me to pick up the pieces of my life while you ran off with someone else?" Chidi looked up, his eyes pleading. "I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I still love you, Amoka." The words hung in the air, but they no longer had any power over her. Amoka shook her head, her expression calm and resolute. "You don't love me, Chidi," she said. "You love the idea of what we had. But that's gone. I've moved on, and so should you." Chidi's shoulders slumped, his defeat evident. "I understand," he murmured. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry." Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Amoka watched him go, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. As she locked up her shop and headed home, she felt lighter than she had in years. She had waited for Chidi once, but she would never wait for anyone again. Her future was hers to shape, and she was finally free.